My choice for the top albums of 2023. Everybody's doing it at the moment, I know, but I thought I'd throw my penny's worth into the mix to talk about the albums that I think were the best releases of 2023. There are 5 of them, and in a short video like this, it's difficult to do them justice, but I'll do my best. My first choice for today is an album by The Lathams called From Nothing to a Little Bit More. Now, if you're outside the UK, you probably haven't heard of The Lathams. They're a 4-piece indie rock pop band that formed in Manchester in 2018, and this is their second album. I think it went to number 1 in the UK, but I don't think it made any mark at all on the Australian charts. Now, I think in this second album, the band has really grown. The first album was good too, but this one I think is even better. It's certainly characterised by great vocals from Alex Moore, who sings in this northern accent. And the musicians, I think, are really coming into their own as well, and lead guitarist Scott Conception is really beginning to express himself. The album concludes with a brilliant track called Undeserving. It's an 8-minute epic ballad about coming to terms with the new life that the singer is leading, the way his life has changed, I guess, since he became part of a successful rock band. It begins with just voice and acoustic guitar and builds, and although it's 8 minutes long, it really doesn't outstay its welcome. I think what marks this album for me is its freshness, its exuberance, and the band really sound as though they're having fun and begin to stretch their legs, really enjoy what they're doing. The second album on my list is by an Australian artist called G-Flip, and the album is called Drummer. G-Flip is Georgia Flippo. You may not have heard of them if you're outside Australia. This is their second album. They describe themselves as a drummer who sings, and this is a powerful pop rock album. It's emotionally raw, describing past and present relationships in the life of a 30-ish something person. There is great drumming on this album, and rightfully the drumming has been brought to the front of the production. G-Flip sings with this almost whiskey voice, but they can really open up their pipes when they want to. They can also be quite delicate, though, when they want to be, as on a track like Australia. And don't miss the drum solo at the end of the final track. I think the thing that stands out about this album is the energy, the attitude and sass with which G-Flip sings. Really worth a listen. Number 3 on my list is My Big Day by the Bombay Bicycle Club. Again, if you're outside the UK, you may not have heard of this band. They're an indie rock band from London formed in 2005, and this is their 6th album. I'm not sure what to call the genre, maybe experimental indie rock with some psychedelic touches. Many of the songs go off in unexpected directions. There are big musical interludes and even some instrumental tracks. It's a very lush, saturated production. There's some great guest vocalists as well, even though I didn't necessarily know who they were. The lyrics of the album are fairly abstract, and I'm not sure I understand all the time what they're getting at. The outstanding track for me is Heaven, and it features Damon Albarn on vocals. There's a great guitar bridge, horns and strings, a big sound, a monster of a song. Onward, the final track, is a 6-minute song. It's much more acoustic, at least at the beginning, a more open sort of production, a more straightforward vocal, at least for the first 3 minutes or so. Then it goes a little manic and cacophonous, and there's a long instrumental break. It's a very complex album, an immersive experience, and takes several listens to really get into. My number 2 album is The Ballad of Darren by Blur. This is Blur's first album of new material since 2015, and what a cracker it is. I was never a big fan of Blur in the 90s. Not that I particularly disliked them, I just wasn't listening to much music in the 90s. So I come to this album not as a Blur fan, keen to have them back, but with a new eye. These are now men in their mid 50s, full of regrets. Things are falling apart around them, relationships are ending. There's a sense of numbness in their life. Life is dull, but also a sense of desperation, dread, and terror. These are now the people that they would have sneered at in their early 20s. So it's not exactly an upbeat album in terms of the lyrics. But Damon Albarn's vocals are absolutely superb, sublime. He uses his lower register here to great effect. Many of the vocals have a kind of Bowie-esque feel to them, circa 1980, Scary Monsters and Super Creeps. And Albarn actually uses a Cockney accent here from time to time, as Bowie does. There are also sort of Bowie-esque shifts in the melody and discordant guitars playing. St Charles Square perhaps has the most Bowie-esque sounding vocals and also lyrics and guitars. The Narcissist was the first single release from the album, and as soon as I heard it, I fell in love with it. Is there such a thing as the perfect pop song? So not an uplifting album lyrically, but absolutely beautiful musically, and wow, just wow. And my number one pick for 2023 is Unreal Unearth by Hosa. Andrew Hosa Byrne is an Irish singer-songwriter, and this is his third album. It was honestly very difficult to know whether to place this or Blur as the number one, but in the end I opted for this one. For the first time on any of Hosia's records, he includes some lyrics in Irish, and although I have no idea what he's singing, they're simply beautiful. I love the Irish accent with which he sings, and words like love and darling just stand out beautifully. I suppose I would describe it as a folk rock album. There's some beautiful poetry here, some beautiful acoustic guitar work, and some great orchestral and choral sections. The album was written during COVID, and it's inspired, Hosa says, by Dante's Inferno, but it also draws on imagery from Irish literature and classical mythology. First Time has a kind of country feel, and here Hosa draws on his deeper vocals, and his vocal range is just astonishing. Again, there are literary references and classical references here. And there's a beautiful line in this song where he's describing a flower that's been broken off and placed in some water, and how it continues to bloom and show off its beauty. And the line is this: fighting off, like all creation, the absence of itself. Francesca is the most obvious reference here to Dante's Inferno. Francesca was a woman who was married off in a political marriage, and she fell in love with her husband's brother, and they had an ongoing affair for 10 years before the husband found out and murdered them both. And she's encountered in the second level of hell, I think. In the Inferno, she's oblivious to her own role. In this, she sees herself as a victim all the time. But in the song, she is defiant and says, if I could, I would go back and do it all again. So while Hosa draws upon these classical references, he's not a slave to them, and he uses them in his own way. Abstract, in parenthesis, Psychopomp, is a simply beautiful song lyrically. Hosa seems to be describing when he's out with a woman at night. I think it's a woman, and I think they hit an animal on the highway, and the woman gets out and holds the animal, and it's about how the animal's eyes show it's dying. Psychopomp in Greek mythology is a being that helps the dead pass over. And the woman here is acting in the role of Psychopomp, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful song. And this is a big album. This is a massive album. Dramatic, passionate. It really doesn't let up. A couple of the songs you might think are maybe a bit overproduced, but in the end I don't think so, because I think that they match the massive dramatic feel of the vocals and the lyrics. Absolutely superb album, and my pick for album of the year.